Vikings. And so, yeah, he has got his fingerprints all over this offense. Now, I don't want to take away credit given to Kevin Stefanski either. I mean, I believe at the end of the day, Kevin is calling the plays. He's making the final decisions. This is his offense. But I think he and Gary are working, sounds like, incredibly well together. And Gary also working well with the head coach, Mike Zimmer. So not a surprise. Not a surprise to me. Obviously, I've been talking about him probably since before he was in the discussion of coming to the Vikings, just over a podcast over the years, how when I played my best football, it was in this style of offense. And then, boom, he shows up. And obviously the Vikings are reaping pretty good rewards right now.
See, and I just thought you had Gary bias, that you just loved Gary because you played for him, but it's all turned out exactly how Mike Zimmer drew it up. Exactly what he wanted for an offense was what Gary Kubiak has brought with his offense. And then it seems to me that Kevin Stefanski has taken those basic principles and then applied them with some modern twists. That's kind of how I interpret this offense.
Yeah, I think so. And obviously Kevin's been through a lot of coordinators over the years, and Gary's been mostly in this style of offense because he's been running it for the last 25 years. It is interesting as a guy that was my journeyman quarterback that we joke around about, but I came in the league and Brian Schottenheimer was my quarterback's coach. Now, of course, he's, I'm sure, learned a ton about the game since then. He was 26 years old, and now he's the coordinator of the Seahawks. And after that, I go Norv Turner for a couple of years, and then I got Scott Linehan and Jason Garrett, and I had Mark Trestman as my quarterback's coach. But when I got to Houston, when I was in this offense, in particular years 2 and years 3, I played the best football of my career. I felt the most comfortable. I felt that I could be successful. I really believed, like, okay, I can do this. I can be a good NFL quarterback. I felt in this system. I never really felt that way in a lot of other systems I was in. I didn't think it really maximized my capabilities. And I think the guys who play in it almost always really like it. Not everybody, but for the most part, I think a lot of the linemen like it. I think a lot of the quarterbacks who played in it feel like they can go out there and just sort of do their job and not have to sort of make magic happen, but just do their job and go through their reads and get the ball out quick. And he creates, they always say a quarterback's best friend is the running game. Well, the Vikings are third in the league in rushing, and so obviously that makes Kirk Cousins' life a lot easier to you and I, a lot easier than going shotgun every single play, which is, it seemed like what they were doing last year.
Yeah, and without trying to throw John DeFilippo under the bus, which is almost impossible for Kirk Cousins, he kind of talked about that, like the different things that have surrounded him and helped him. And some of them are personnel, like Irv Smith, but it does seem to be such a better fit. And you and I talked a lot last year during the season on podcast versions of this show about the play action. And now he's number 1 in the NFL in play action percentage. He's got 127 quarterback rating when running play action. That's been such a huge part of it. I want you to explain.
And what if he would have hit a couple of those deep ones down the field? Say,
I know his numbers would be even better.
I mean, Kirk has missed half dozen guys that had a step, 40, 50 yards down the field. And, listen, those aren't easy throws. I'm not trying to say he's hit all of them, but man, if he hits a couple more of those things, those numbers would be even much better.
So I want you to explain, since Mike Zimmer at the podium was as effusive in his praise of anyone that I've ever heard. I think that Gary Kubiak just moved his way into a tie with Teddy Bridgewater for the people that you ever ask him about, and he just goes over the top to praise them. And we know that Zimmer is a very honest guy, and he doesn't do it unless he wants to. It's Harrison Smith, Delvin Cook, Teddy Bridgewater, and Gary Kubiak all tied for the lead for all-time praise from Mike Zimmer. So I want you to explain like some of these, I guess, Gary Kubiak staples that work so well. Because, I mean, we talked about it in the offseason. It's going to work. This is why it's going to work. This is why it's going to be better. It looks really good throughout training camp for the most part. And then we start out the season, a couple of big games, some stumbling blocks, but then it's really gotten going. And aside from Kansas City, it has been great, this offense, and emerged as one of the best in the NFL. So I want you to give me some of these sort of Gary Kubiak classic things that worked in the 90s and worked when you were in Houston and seem to still be working today.
Got you. So can I say this before I go into that? I'd like to say, I think what also Zimmer was talking about, and not just the X's and O's stuff, which Gary's basically been running a lot of the same stuff for a long time. So I think he's got a really deep knowledge of this offense and what he's doing and deep beliefs in it. But I think what fans don't see, and even though when he was the head coach, people don't really see because it's just press conferences, he's pretty quiet, is how likable Gary is. I mean, he is like the easiest guy to talk to. Guys who would have all, personal problems occasionally, whatever, would go into his office. He was the easiest guy to talk to. He did not have that authoritarian feel to him. But also it wasn't a screw around session. Like, he was all about being a pro. Like, this is pro football. This isn't screw around time. But he also was, I don't know, I think that's what one of the things what Zimmer's enjoying, talking to him. I know he was saying there wasn't much chit chat and just whatever chatter, but Gary's a really easy guy to talk to. He's been around a long time. He's seen a lot of things. They both have seen a lot of things. These two, old longtime coordinators and head coaches now, and I think there's just some mutual respect there from that aspect. So in this offense, we talk a lot about the zone running game. All right, so there's really two types of zone. There's inside zone, and then there's outside zone. The outside zone, to me, is really what makes the whole thing happen. And basically it's more what they call a stretch play, basically. And as the linemen work down the line, they're trying to cut people off. A center and guard are trying to work to cut someone off as one of them works up to the linebacker. And if you can get somebody out of the gap, as an example, I'm the center. There's somebody to my right. He is the nose tackle. If I can actually get on the other side of him, his job is that gap between the guard and the center. That is his spot. But if I can actually outflank him with the right footwork, with the right combination, those types of things, he is now not in his gap, which means there can be a big hole there if everyone else gets blocked, right? So it's about forcing defenses to stay in their gaps, all right? So because of that, teams really have to focus on being in the right spots and being in their gaps. And so they have to, play the run first, obviously. But on top of it, that style, those plays create great movement by the defense laterally down the line, left and right down the line of scrimmage. And then the quarterbacks, and it sort of creates this wall, which is fairly easy then to just create basically a pass protection off of it. And those pass protection plays, when the defense has really committed to the run and everyone has come up into their gaps, if it is a run, does create these big spots, deep down the field, in the secondary, because everyone's so close to the line of scrimmage, and two, has had to try to play the run for the first 2 or 3 seconds before they even realize it's passed, because they do such a good job of making it look the same. The details are fantastic. And again, that's why I said I think guys enjoyed playing it, because there was a sort of a black and white, this is the detail. It wasn't like, oh, just go block it. It was like, no, this is your exact footwork, and this is what we're thinking. And that created a highly executing, highly efficient, sort of fundamentally sound, offense that, quarterbacks can excel in and can win games in. But I think on top of it with Gary was he also knew, like, he wasn't trying to lead the league in offense. The NFL is different than college. It's generally not these high scoring affairs. More often than not, it's these grinded out games that you have to have a good defense to win championships. And you have to have an offense that protects the football, makes a few big plays a game. Quarterback can get, first downs on third down. But, again, it's not about having 500 yards a game. It's sort of efficiency and quality football. And so it's different than college. And but all those details are so much to coach. That's probably why a lot of colleges don't run this style of offense anymore, and they're on the shotgun. So it's highly conducive to being a winning offense when it's run properly. I would say the biggest weakness of it is in straight drop back protection, because a lot of times the linemen are a little bit smaller. They're not looking for the big Bryant McKinneys of the, and Phil Lodeholt type guys generally. They're looking for guys that can move, like Bradbury. Bradbury, obviously, I mean, you look at him, obviously he looks like an offensive lineman, but I don't know what his body fat is, but it's not much. I mean, that guy is in really good shape. So a lot of times those guys are a little bit smaller, more around that 300-pound mark, especially on the inside, and less on the 330-pound mark or whatever, like with some of these linemen. And so that can be hard in just straight drop back protection. And I think we all saw that on Sunday night, how much Dak Prescott, a big offensive line, the old Dallas Cowboy Jason Garrett theory of bigger guys, they had better pass protection. And, but for Dak Prescott and obviously the Vikings have struggled in just straight drop back pass protection this year.
Yeah, and we've seen if they can't get into 2nd and 5 or 2nd and 4, how much that affects them, because then it just becomes much more difficult for Kirk Cousins to use and sell the play action. And then when it's 3rd and 7 to 3rd and 10, he has, I've had this number, I'm trying to remember it, a 70 quarterback rating, I think, in 3rd and longer than 6 so far this year, which tells you a lot about how they've prevented him from being in those types of situations, because he hasn't performed well in 3rd and long really at any point during his career. But the difference between last year and this year is just how many times you're in 3rd and long. Last year, they ranked 30th in rushing, so they were in those situations a lot. I also wanted to ask you what you think about the combination of Kubiak's system with the personnel that the Vikings built around it this year, because I think that they took the right direction. And as you remember, in the offseason, I wanted them to go even more all in on the offensive side. But when you spend your first 4 draft picks on offense, and 3 of them are significant contributors, I think that Irv Smith has been a huge, huge deal for why this Kubiak offense has worked really well. And I'll give you a number to back that up. Out of 73 tight ends who are fairly regular players in the NFL, Irv Smith ranks 10th in run blocking. The fact that they can go down the field throwing with him, use play actions with him, and that he can block really effectively. I mean, he's up there with guys who are NFL veteran blockers in terms of his Pro Football Focus grades. He's up there with Lee Smith and Rhett Ellison in terms of how he's grading as a run blocker. I think that's really impressive, and it's opened up a lot of different things for this Vikings offense. That pick right now, to me, I don't care what his fantasy stats are, it looks like a home run.
I think so. And what I saw also the other day was some situations in 3rd and sort of medium to long where they kept 2 tight ends in the game. They had Rudy on one side and they'd have Irv Smith maybe in the slot, while the Vikings were down a wide receiver. They looked at it as, hey, if we can keep a regular personnel on defense, say 3 linebackers over there, by having 2 tight ends, they like that matchup with Irv Smith on the linebacker and, some sort of cover 2 look or something like that. So they're obviously really liking this kid. That was a huge pick for them. That was a pick I would say they couldn't miss on. Like they really needed to have a guy like this. And I'm looking forward to the future because we really haven't seen it yet. Is he going to be one of these guys that, if he can develop into a really good route runner, could do some things on the outside that we've seen teams do over the years, Gronkowski or these types of guys. Can he run sort of wide receiver routes, slants and sluggos and just stop routes or whatever and be sort of the outside passing game? That would be absolutely huge. But this offense definitely needs to have 2 tight ends. Even 3 tight ends is great too, and they use that sometimes. And you go with, say, a 3 tight end look or 2 tight ends with a fullback and a tailback. That really does limit what a defense can do. Like they just don't have this huge playbook for when teams are in those, because those are usually sort of short yardage situations. And so teams, a lot of times, they'll have basically 2 or 3 things they'll play to, and that's pretty much it. And, they know they want to stop the run or whatever, and they'll find ways to run play action and things like that out of, a 3 tight end personnel group where a team only plays 2 defenses. And the quarterback really has a great feel where he needs to go with the football because he's not getting all these blitzes from all over the place that you get when you're in, say, a 4 wide look. And so it's a neat offense to run. And I think, doing a really good job. But it all starts with running the football. It all starts with, can you run the football? Because those play actions don't work. If you can't, and you're also in 3rd and 10s and 12s, if you don't run the football some, they don't have to be, 7s and 8s all the time. But I think I said it before the season, runs of 1 and 2 can be just fine, sort of keep you on track. Because as we all know, 3rd and 5 is a big difference in this offense between 3rd and 10. To me, 3rd and 10 feels like this is going to be hard to get. Hopefully something bad doesn't happen. 3rd and 5, I feel pretty good about that they'll find a way to get a first down because they'll execute in this sort of what I believe is a high execution offense.
So interestingly, Pro Football Focus and a couple other people who love analytics and dive deep, they found that even if a team isn't particularly good at running, that play action still works. But the contention I would have on that is it's not really about that so much as it is the situations where you get to run play action. Like last year, Kirk Cousins' play action percentage could have been higher for sure under John DeFilippo, and I'm sure some of that was play calling. But I think it was more of circumstances that have allowed Cousins to be number one in the NFL in play action percentage. And the same thing went for Jared Goff when he was last year. When Todd Gurley is at his absolute best, which he is not close to anymore, he's averaging 5-something yards a carry, which sets you up in 2nd and 5 all the time. And then you have all these opportunities to run the play actions. So it looks like Sean McVay is this play action genius, which he may be, but it's as much the circumstance that sets that up. And I think that was probably always something that I didn't have a great grasp of before, like how these two things marry together. A lot of times we look at running like, it can be a very inefficient play. I mean, passing, you look at the yards per pass attempt, they're much higher than yards per run attempt. But this year, the way that they've tied them together, I think it sort of encapsulates it much better to when it's running at its best with a great running back and a great passer and great receivers, how it can all come together.
Yeah, and also just having that extra blocker, that is nice too.
Right.
And people think like, well, you're only putting 2 receivers out in the pass pattern because you're leaving that tight end to block, but sometimes that's okay. And those guys can cover a lot of ground, and I'm glad you're starting to see, I guess, the fruition of what I was trying to describe the last maybe couple of years, but in particular this offseason.
I mean, I believed you.
When we saw this off. I know.
I knew it was true.
So I will say this though. Another thing is that it's just nice for linemen to come off the ball and not have to. I mean, pass blocking is extremely tough. If you ask every lineman, hey, we can come off the ball and run block every play, they'd prefer that every single time, I believe. And we also saw against one of the best defensive lines in the league on Sunday night, the Dallas Cowboys, over the course of the game, if you can run the football, you can start to really wear them out. And that's a good D line, but I think they're better pass rushers than run defenders. And I think this Vikings offensive line and tight ends really sort of wore them out at the end of that football game. So it's a good scheme. If you can run the football, it's great. But also, again, we're talking about setting up these great play action plays. I just knew that Stephon Diggs' numbers would go up as far as yards per catch. And they are obviously way up